All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, it's an unfortunate aspect of life that when you're successful, everybody wants a part of the credit. And when you're unsuccessful, nobody wants to take their fair share of the blame. And that seems to be the case with the disintegration of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Paul George has asserted that it was mutually agreed that they should start to tear apart their team and trade away some of their more valuable assets. Well, Sam Presti has now come to the forefront and says that no, it was not quote unquote mutual, because what that would imply is that he approached Paul George, or that they approached one another and they were of one mind and on one accord. And I think that the reason why Sam Presti is doing this is because he's anticipating that the Oklahoma City Thunder are probably not going to be that good this season, even though, to be quite honest with you, I think that if they were to keep Chris Paul, that they would have an outside chance of making the playoffs, even with the team that they have right there, because they still have some good pieces. They have a decent roster on that squad. And that might be an opportunity for Chris Paul to show that he's not the cancer that he's starting to become known as. Even though I think that it would be more in his best interest, especially at this stage of his career, to be traded to a championship contender. At this point, what team really that's a championship contending team wants a 34-year-old point guard who's clearly slowing down, making $45 million a year? So that's really what Sam Presti's dealing with. And he knows that if he allows Paul George to keep propagating the notion that he was on one accord with Paul, with disintegrating the team, especially getting rid of a homegrown hometown legend in Russell Westbrook, that might end in some fallout with him eventually losing his job somewhere down the line. You never know what could happen if you allow certain media narratives to take hold. So anyway, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Back to our lead story. Yesterday, I sat down with new LA Clipper Paul George along with Kawhi Leonard. PG talked about his exit from OKC, and he told me it was, quote, a mutual decision. Thunder GM Sam Presti had a different version. You can take a listen to both sides here.
We all were on the same page. This was nothing that came out of the blue. Felt like we were just stagnant. And
in other words, Paul George is dropping dime on Sam Presti. I even stated this in another video on this topic, that it was pretty obvious to me that the situation in Oklahoma was becoming so untenable that they knew that they were going to have to blow it up. Because when you piece together all these high-priced free agents and you cannot even get out of the first round, keep in mind, they had Carmelo Anthony, Paul George, and Russell Westbrook on one team, and they lost to the Utah Jazz, who at that time basically just had Donovan Mitchell who could score. And they got scraped by that team. They lost in 6 games. They really should have lost in 5 games. And then they come back the next season and they lose in 5 games to the Portland Trailblazers. The same Portland Trailblazer team that went 7 games with the Denver Nuggets. So when you just gauge that, you say to yourself, not only are we not a top-tier team in the Western Conference, not even talking about the NBA, we're not a top-tier team in the Western Conference, we're not even a second-tier team in the Western Conference. Because Denver and Portland are second-tier teams in the Western Conference this season. So it's very obvious that they had to blow it up. It's very much like a relationship that's going nowhere. It started to become toxic. And both people are looking for signs from the other person that they're willing to end it, because maybe they're not willing to say something. So Sam Presti knew. He knew that the best thing for everyone involved was to blow the situation up. But he was just waiting for the right moment. He was hoping that he would get the right deal, maybe, so that he can make something happen where everyone could be happy. And he's also one of these GMs who thinks that he can make wonders with draft picks, as he should. He should think that when you look at his draft history.
The next thing was, let's go forward and go on with other plans. And again, it was mutual amongst everybody.
I know that he had used the term mutual. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, because that would infer that we were wanting to trade Paul George, which I think most people would agree that probably wasn't on the top of our off-season priority list.
Right, but Sam Presti, let's be for real. That's like you're dating some gorgeous woman, got big old breasts, big booty, wonderful face, has a nice personality, but for whatever reason, you guys just don't click on a certain level. The relationship doesn't work. Everybody's asking you, what happened? What happened with you and Tina? You don't want to admit that it might have been your fault. You don't want to admit that maybe it was something on her end, or you guys just didn't click. So you want to make up some bullshit excuse. That's life. Things happen. Sometimes situations look better on a chalkboard or on paper than they do in real life. And I knew that the Paul George, Russell Westbrook situation was never going to work because Russell Westbrook couldn't make it work with Kevin Durant, who's a better player than Paul George. And Paul George actually had a Kevin Durant-esque season, or was having a Kevin Durant-esque season last year before he hurt his shoulders, and they were still just an above average team. So when you have players like that who are 30, 28 years old, and you already see with Westbrook, he's starting to trend downward. He hasn't fallen off the cliff yet, but he's starting to trend downward. You saw what everybody else saw, which is that if you cannot even get out of the first round, you have to start looking towards the future. So when Paul George approached you, or when the Clippers approached you, you were happy. That was an excuse for you to end a situation that you knew was not going to bear fruit.
But I would say that it was not adversarial at all.
All right, so what do you make of Presti's response, Malika?
I think that it's just semantics and vocabulary.
I agree.
That was the same sentiment that Paul George was trying to express, was that, look, this wasn't something that was volatile. It was something that we were able to kind of resolve together. And I think that that's kind of what Sam Presti was saying, too. I think that he just used a little bit more of some SAT words to describe it.
Or it could be revisionist. Now, I obviously...
I actually agree with the both of you. I think that it's revisionist, and he's utilizing semantics. And the reason why he's doing that is so that he can extricate himself from a potential dumpster fire. Because who knows what the Oklahoma City Thunder might be this year. They might just start selling all their players away if things get bad enough. And he does not want to be the face of the decline of what people are going to assume should potentially have been, when you look at all the talent that they had at one time, people are going to claim that they should have been a dynasty because they had Russell Westbrook and James Harden and Kevin Durant all on the same team. And that's the roughest type of team to coach and to general manage. A team with hyper-talented players, but without any one player that has a high basketball IQ. Your talent only matters when you have a player that has a high basketball IQ. Because without high IQ, you're not going to win championships. So it's only going to make everyone involved in that situation look incompetent when you don't win.
I don't believe that Paul's trying to do anything to add some PR favor to his situation. Then fine, I can have accepted. But there's still the shocking nature of what happened. You know, obviously we saw the clip of them on stage together. I intend to be in OKC a long time. Signed a 4-year deal. Unless when he signed that 4-year deal, there was a conversation that, you know, if this doesn't work after a year, let's be able to move my contract, and they know that going into it, that obviously this was not mutual.
There are some chicken and egg things here, right, too, though, because, no, I totally agree and believe Sam Presti when he said top of our to-do list this summer was not trade Paul George. Actually. But look, with the way the contracts were lining up, with the way that they hadn't been able to get out of the first round with that team, you have to think that if this season they didn't get out of the first round, and then Paul was looking at just that expiring 1 year left on his deal, because remember, it's a player option at the end, then all of a sudden, okay, they would be looking to trade Paul George, right? Because they can't have a Kevin Durant situation happen to them all over again. So they were able to leverage Paul George wanting to go play with Kawhi Leonard, and the Clippers feeling they were getting a 2-for-1 with Kawhi Leonard as part of the trade to get a lot more for Paul George than they would have a summer ago. So I do think it's kind of interesting how this all layers. Sam Presti also wrote an op-ed in the Oklahoman today, used the phrase reload and replenish several times to describe the Thunder's philosophy. Basically, he wanted to set expectations. You of Philadelphia, David Penniman, is this...
Reload and replenish. That's basically just a refurbished way of saying we're going to go into the process. What Philadelphia was doing a couple of years ago.
You trust the process?
Reload and replenish.
Exactly.
Load and replenish.
Print out the T-shirts.
He's got plenty of draft picks. But guess what? Danny Ainge had all those draft picks. No rings to show for it yet. You know, be careful what you wish for.
Right, but you can't always guarantee a championship just because you have a lot of draft picks. At the end of the day, Danny Ainge does have a championship from 2008. So just because you have a lot of draft picks, there's no guarantee that you're going to get a championship, because the only way that you get championships is when you get top 3, top 2 players in the league, maybe top 4 players in the league on the same squad or leading your franchise, and that's very, very difficult to do.
They were able to get a historical number of picks, so we'll see what happens. But I kind of like the reload and replenish. It's a new R&R.
Reload and replenish. We'll be doing that.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see how things turn out for the Oklahoma City Thunder next season. So peace.